Thank you very much. This is a joint work with Neslihan Uller from Michigan. Nestle's sitting right there. So if you have any questions, hard questions, that's to her. I wanted to thank Templeton Foundation and SPI for sponsoring this research. And here's the thing, the data actually, a bunch of the data came last night. So this is a very fresh of the boat data. There may be some things that we still didn't look at. Actually, very little did we look at. But here we go. So Dan actually did already a big introduction to the subject of giving and taxation and how those price elasticities matter. But just me give you a little review here. So if you think since 1917, donations to many charities in the US have become tax deductible. And so if you think there are really two effects that operate. So when you have taxes, on the one hand, they decrease the after net income tax, which has a negative effect on giving. That's the income part, the income effect. And taxes, on the other hand, decrease the price of giving, which is a positive effect. And that's the substitution effect. And so basically, that's the simple economic model that we work with when we saying, well, when we impose taxes, will it increase giving or decrease giving? It really depends on these two things. It may go either way. And so, again, the example, you don't need that. We already covered that. And Dan already pointed out that if you look at the literature on taxes and giving, you actually find a lot of things that just go different ways. So you can find, higher taxes increase giving. You can find there is no significant relationship. You can find the other way around. And so basically when Jim, in his book, he basically says at the end of the day that the net effect of taxation and charitable donation is still not understood. Because we get basically all these results that are very sensible to how you estimate this. And Dan has already shown another example that if you change the methodology, things are going to get very different. And so if you think about this problem, it becomes even more complicated if you take into account that, actually some of the taxes, there is also transaction costs. And people may think of when I give, when I think about giving to charity, not only, I know that, yes, I'm going to get this tax benefit, but I know that also my taxes are not going to be necessarily returned to the society in the proportion that I give them to the government, because a bunch of it is going to be wasted in the process. We call it transaction costs in economics. And another one, something that actually Jim was pointed out yesterday is that, if you think maybe rich people and poor people are different. And so they have different incomes, and if they have a different altruistic preferences, then again, you have a very big problem there, another confound effect. And so try to figure out this mess with empirical strategies. There's going to be a lot of debates, a lot of questions. And so what do we do here? Well, we go a little different way. So we have a theory, which mostly Neslihan worked on, and we have a theory that basically will try to incorporate some of these elements. And then we do a framed field experiment. And I'll give the details of that. And we try to answer these questions. We're still going to look and estimate the elasticities and try to get that. But let me just say what we've done so far. So the theory, this is the only scary slide that you will see today, I promise. So, but if those of you who are economists, this is a very standard theory. You have a utility from personal consumption, and then you have a utility that you get from consuming a public good or donating to the public good. So this is your public schools, this is your roads, and this is your fridge at home, how much is in the fridge. So basically, individuals' private consumption will depend on the income that you get, on how much you donate, so you're going to give something, and then also on this redistribution, how much will you get back from the government? Because some of the taxes will be returned to you, and also it depends on the public good. How much public good will be provided at the end of the day. And so if you work out that model, you get some kind of, a first order condition, and from there you can do some comparative statistics with respect to what happens if the tax increases or if the redistribution rate increase. We can get, basically, let me just tell you quickly what happens here. So the predictions of the theory, which we're still trying to decide which elements should we incorporate in the theory. just because there's a lot of moving pieces here, as I already said. But the two pieces that we do have in the theory right now is the tax rate and redistribution. And so here's the difference between tax and redistribution as we think in this model and just in our experiment overall. So tax is basically the amount that will reduce, so my net income that will be left, you know, it's going to be taxable. So that's the tax rate. It's 25% on what is left. And then that amount is going to be collected by, let's say, a government. And so out of that amount, portion will be actually redistributed to everybody. And so the redistribution part, again, it's going to be, it doesn't have to be the full redistribution because of the transaction costs. And so that second element is going to be R, which is the redistribution rate. Think about this as a transaction cost, whatever you want to think about it, that's the part. So there's a tax part and there's redistribution. And this is the comparative prediction that we get from the model. And whether 1 or 2 is true, crucially will depend on the curvature of the utility function, which is another thing is going to be difficult for us to do it in the lab because, you know, to measure the curvature of the utility function, it's, you know, it's not trivial. We do it through the elicitation of risk preferences. But this is basically this is the story. Now let me just go to the experiment so you know exactly what we're doing here. So stage 1, we have participants. They come, they work on this cognitive task, which is just a GRE, 10 questions from a standard GRE book, and they work on those 10 questions for 20 minutes. They are told that depending on their performance in this task, in the second stage, they may, you know, that their performance may determine their earnings in the second stage. Now, why do we use may? Because we have different treatments. And so in one treatment, it's true that it actually, the performance determines your earning. In the second treatment, it's not true. So that's why we use may, to make sure that the comparison between the treatments will be clean. So in the second stage, depending on how you performed, in unequal treatment, if you perform relatively well to others in the group, you get $45. If you perform so-so, you get $30. If you perform really bad, you get $15. And so you have basically, you're matched into a group, and in that group there is somebody who got $45, somebody who got $30, and somebody who got $15. That's one group. In equal treatment, everybody is the same. Everybody gets $30, so your quiz really didn't count for much. Does that make sense? So that's basically the manipulation that we're going to have. And we do want to have this equal and unequal society. It turns out at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. But we have that control. And then after that, in stage 3, you make a contribution to a charity. And you can contribute basically after you're matched with 3 other participants. You're matched with 3 participants are matched to one group. You can donate, you know, somebody will be donating to the Food for the Poor, Doctors Without Borders, Save the Child, American Red Cross. So basically you kind of have this sense of a public good because all of us, we're contributing to American Red Cross. And you actually making 10 different contributions. Let me give you the slide here. Because what happens, we say, well, listen, if you contribute $10 in this first cell, we're not going to tax we're going to tax nothing, and so everything that you did not contribute is going to stay in your pocket. Okay? Now, in the second line, we say, how about this? If we tax 25% of your income, so imagine this, that you contributed $10 and you were left with $20. On those left $20, we're going to impose the tax of 25%. And so after that, we collect also from other participants in your group, and we're going to equally distribute this tax. So that's the redistribution part. When we think about taxes, they serve the purpose. And that is, you get part of that tax. In our case, it's an egalitarian society. Everybody gets equal share of this tax benefit. The government collects. And in this case, government does a really good job because they don't waste anything. 100% what they collect, they give back to people equally. And so we manipulate this tax rate. Now here, we again manipulate the tax rate from 25 to 75%, but now half of income is going to be, half of this collected tax income is going to be destroyed. Whether we need to pay, for some services, for the agency, for IRS, and so on and so forth. So basically, that's the transaction cost. And we have the extreme case where basically all of the income is destroyed. So basically, you get taxes and all of that. That's extreme case in this case. Zero redistribution. And so subjects make these 10 decisions. We randomly select one, and then we write a check to charity for that group. Then we also elicited risk preferences. This is an important part as well of our design because we want to get that. The theory says that the curvature of the utility really going to drive some of these comparative statics results. So we do that. We also have social preferences. We have kind of a dictator game. I didn't have time to look at that yet. And then we have a questionnaire, a listing bunch of questions, the attitude towards charity, whether they like the charity, whether they knew about the charity, other demographic information, political orientation. Again, that stuff we still need to analyze. But let me give you the results. And the results are going to be basically in 3-4 slides. It's just going to be a bunch of graphs and a couple of regressions. So here's the first result. Yes, to the charity. They actually donate to the charity. So let me just explain again. Sorry, I'm trying to, what's my time limit here? Okay, so people donate to the charity. So let's say you have $30. You made $30 in your earning stage. You donate to the charity $10. So you're left with $20. On those $20, we're going to impose tax. Depending on that table, that tax can be 25, 50%, or 75%. Let's say it's 50%. So 50% is going to be collected by the experimenter. So I'm taking away 10 of your dollars out of 20. And this $10 goes into the pool of money that I'm going to collect also from other people in your group. And then that pool will be distributed back to you. Now, it's equally going to be distributed, but sometimes half of that pool will disappear, or all of it. So the idea, that's the redistribution part. That's the two part that basically come into tax. So what happens here? So it turns out, remember, those are the two manipulations. There's this tax rate, and there is this redistribution rate. And so it turns out that people are in equal treatment. When everybody gets the same, there's pretty much no change, no response to the tax rate. Very little, elasticity. Very little reaction, which is, again, would be very consistent with what Dan has presented, but not as much consistent with the empirical literature that exists that says that, estimates are like 1 and even higher elasticity, which is, again, that would be very inconsistent. So, but in this case, we get very little reaction here to the tax rate, but we get a really big reaction to the redistribution rate. Now, what is redistribution rate? That's basically the waste, right? That the government, basically, you're giving your money, and you know that the government is not going to do such a good job with your money. And so basically, if you know that 100% of your money is going to go back to people, you give a lot. But if you know that there's going to be a lot of waste, you give little. So basically, people are sensitive not necessarily to tax per se, but they're sensitive more to the fact how well my money will be used by the government. That redistribution part, is there going to be a huge transaction cost, or is it just going to be, there are going to be no transaction cost, government is going to be very efficient. And so also we have this baseline condition, that's the utopia that we all would like to live when nobody has to pay any taxes. And just, and it turns out that, look, when we move from here, when there is no taxes, people give, they give something. But then if you start introducing some taxes, they actually give more. That shift is not significant. Now, once you start introducing waste, you know that the government is wasting money. Then you start giving less and less as you move on in this direction. Now, with unequal treatment, you pretty much get exactly the same picture. Almost no reaction to tax rate, but you have a huge reaction to redistribution rate. And again, the same picture here in utopia. You give relatively little. As soon as you see some taxes and you know the government is not wasting anything, bam, you start contributing a lot. Because the substitution effect dominates the income effect. But as soon as you see that there is a waste happening, so this is the redistribution rate goes basically to 0, then again you get this huge decline. Okay? And so finally, this is the cool result. That I ran this regression last night. I still need to do a bunch of robustness checks. But here's what happens. This is basically replicating the story. So we have independent variables here, tax rate and redistribution rate. And really, it's the redistribution. That's the part that the government, how efficiently government is using taxes. That's what really matters. But then look at this. When we interact with SAFE, and SAFE here simply measures the curvature of the utility function, because we had risk elicitation task. And so we could actually say, how risk averse, or, whether you have a concave utility function or maybe convex, Cobb-Douglas, or something else. And so when you look at this curvature and you take into account, you interact tax with the curvature and the distribution rate with the curvature of this utility function, you pretty much find that it moderates all of the result. Because if redistribution really matter over here, now it becomes insignificant. And the only part it's significant is when you take into account the curvature of the utility function. And you interact that with the, again, that's the comparative static prediction of the model. So, so that's basically our results. Still a bunch of stuff needs to be done. We need to calculate these cross-price elasticities between tax and redistribution. Obviously, there's heterogeneity and demographic differences. Social preferences may matter, so we have all that information, still needs to be incorporated. But so, and also you can think about extensions, progressive taxation, larger groups, things like that. But the main findings, what we already can say for sure, is that yes, people are actually in the lab, in a very controlled environment, are not that sensitive to taxes. They're not that sensitive. And you find that pretty much that elasticity will be very low. We haven't put the number yet, but it's going to be very low. But people, what they are sensitive is to the fact how efficient their contributions are going to be. Will the government waste their money, or will the government actually use their money to the best? And and that's the part that is driving that basically response. That elasticity is going to be really high. And it's, definitely significant response there. And it turns out that the response also is heterogeneous among the, among the individuals, which we still need to look more into. And it's driven in big part by the utility function that people have. So far, this is what we have. Obviously, still much more work to be done. And I would welcome your comments. Yeah, Chuck?
The question, the group of people that were in this the subject, were they a relatively good distribution of income earners, so that some file long-term? 85% of people actually don't get a tax benefit because they don't file in a long form. And so it seems like you'd see a difference with people that actually might get a benefit from.
No, this is a good point. So this is our, we have students. Pretty much very homogeneous population. So the point of this experiment is more on a strategic level. It shows that, on the very basic level, when you take away all of those differences, and you just look why people, how they respond to taxes, in a very controlled, machine-like environment. And it turns out that people are not responsive that much. Are not responsive. Obviously it would be nice to get that data and maybe conduct similar type of experiments with a more heterogeneous population when you really have rich people and poor people. So that would be great, but we're still not there yet. Yes?
I may have misunderstood your explanation, but when you were talking about redistribution and waste, you're using those fairly interchangeably, but they have very different meanings. And and I think the way you define it, you made the experiment, you're describing it as waste, but it's actually redistribution to self and group. So I think you have to be careful about how you're...
No, absolutely. So this is just the wording, we actually, those are on the opposite spectrum, the parameters on the opposite spectrum. We just need to figure out whether we want to frame it as a waste or redistribution. I agree. We actually have it as a redistribution in the paper that we're writing right now. Yes? Less. Maybe.
Yeah, just the last one, just because I feel that when you have unequal income, that when you distribute equally, the tax revenue,
Mhm.
you know, that's itself a public good, right? Because you are, so
Exactly.
you need to take care of, that goes with your comments. So it's not,
Yeah,
it's
the income doesn't play a role. That was the interesting part. The people are not that, you know, that variable is not significant there.